When we started the Road to Science Center, one of the first things we did was we interviewed all our partners, saying what are the most critical issues you would like us to be working on, and what are the issues why you're here today? Why do you feel this why Road to Science Center is needed? And what we did was we had all the companies which were at that stage members in the center fill in a level of interest and feedback form, a live form, where they were ranking, they were pointing out which topics, and then later on we did a ranking of the most important ones. And green materials and smart infrastructure were two of the things which ranked very high of all the partners from different directions. What we did then is we started developing a strategy from within the center, and that became GIMI. You see some of the booklets around that stood for Green Infrastructure Material Innovations, and that became an agenda, which it became an underlying philosophy which we had. At the same time, Vinnova actually came out with a request from bottom-up strategies from society to say if there are collaborations, if there are already groups which are talking to each other, which include academia, industry, and government parties, we would like to hear about that, and you have an opportunity to develop these ideas further. So we submitted at that time our GIMI agenda, and we received funding for that, and from that we further developed it into a wider innovation program proposal with more partners beyond Road to Science, and that became Infra Sweden 2030. That was a 3-year project or a process in which we actually were rewriting and submitting and being rejected and resubmitting, and so it was a long process. But eventually we managed, in fact, to become a strategic innovation program. For the past, we've got the news in April this year that we in fact succeeded in becoming one of these innovation programs. Sweden now has 15. And there are some thoughts that it will stay with these 15 for at least the coming years. The program will start beginning of next year, so this period has been a startup period to actually build the structure and decide on the communication and things like this. So today I was thinking of giving you a little bit overview of what it looks like, what the goals of the program are. Where we are, and you also have opportunity to ask some questions. This is our logo, in case you're wondering. So this is Miss Infra, and it's supported. So we receive our funding from Vinnova directly, but in principle, all the strategic innovations programs are collaborative between Vinnova, the energy agencies, and Formas. What is Infra Sweden focusing on? It is focusing on two main goals as a program. And in principle, we're talking about a 12-year program, as I mentioned. So that means it's quite getting near the 2030 line. Therefore, we can have these high goals. The one is to make the Swedish transportation infrastructure system, and we're talking transportation infrastructure, so we don't talk about planes and we don't talk about maritime infrastructure, 100% more sustainable than it is today. The other goal is that Sweden will in fact become world leading in not only the invention but also implementation and nurturing of smart and sustainable transportation infrastructure innovations. So these are the main goals of the program. In that, what we've done is we have assembled a structure in which we have various stakeholders and assets combined, which will be giving a new innovation framework. And that innovation framework is not only promoting innovation or technical solutions, but it's also promoting a new structure of how we can collaborate together. Because one thing that we acknowledge is a very complex system. It's not as simple as that we can have a technical invention, say at KTH, and we hand it out to industry partners and say, there you go, make it an innovation, implement it. There's very often many structural changes that need to happen. The same people that are there today, most of the same people will be taking care of this new technology and having to embed it. Companies have to reassign staff and make different processes, but the entire system, also how are infrastructure projects being procured, what are the things that people are being rewarded on, and how can we actually generate new ideas. These are not trivial questions. And if we look at one of the examples I used a lot during this process of developing, when we were developing this program, is look at the mobile phone. Think of the phones that we had 50 years ago. I still remember myself the phone that was on the wall with the cord. Look at what the phone is today. That's huge innovation, and it's a completely different content of what a phone is and what you can do with it. But then think about the roads and the railroads. What did we have 50 years ago, and what do we have today? There are some changes, but nothing like this one. The functionalities are so different. But we're talking about smart infrastructure much more today. In Sweden, even as every day an item on the news about electrified roads. So we are very rapidly turning infrastructure technology into a complex system with many stakeholders, with many functionalities. That means the similar changes which you have to do with the mobile phone. We now have to think about infrastructure technology. It will no longer be as simple as it perhaps was before. That means if we as an industry don't develop together with the Ericssons and the IBMs this technology, which will become part of our infrastructure, it will take a much longer time for solutions to actually work. We had a conference at KTH a couple of months ago, which was about the smart built environment and how digitalization could actually change the world. And then there was the VD of Ericsson, and Morten was there as well, and he was saying we can deliver a battery or a solution which you can put in the road for a new type of road. We who work in this industry know that it's not that simple, because we have to think about what will happen in the winter when there's snow on there, what will happen after we construct it and we go with the bulldozers over it, what about the maintenance in a long-term perspective, what about the style of tires. The problem with inventions that are developed outside an industry and being imposed on an industry is that they rarely work. That means our industry itself has to start developing, and is developing this, but has to do it in a more structured way. How can we have in-house capacity? How can we have a common language between different stakeholders? Because even today, if we talk about asphalt project and we have a chemist and a physicist next to each other, it takes about 2 years before you speak even remotely the same language. Can you imagine if now we're talking about electrical engineers and about policymakers? So Infra Sweden is talking very much about how can we make strategic alliances between partners in a way that we commonly together develop innovations in a way that the entire system is changed. That means also government must allow, for example, innovations. Today, one of the major discussions that Trafikverket has is they are not allowed to be bound to a specific partner if that is an invention which is patented, and therefore only one particular company can sell this technology. So the marketing drive which you have with iPhones, where you can say I am an IT company, I can make this new technology, I can sell it, I can make business out of it, is much harder in our industry because we have one major client which has restrictions of who they can and cannot be. It has to be open market. So the whole mechanisms of inventions, innovations is much harder in this field. But yet we're talking about very complex and interesting problems and solutions which, if we do it well, we can provide very much niche products from within Sweden. So Infra Sweden is not just about having a pot of money and handing it out for new technology to be generated. It's also about methods. How can we start working together? How can we ensure that while we are developing inventions, while we are doing these innovations, we also talk to the government that it's allowed on the long term, that standardization is changed along the way. So by the time these inventions reach the market from these Swedish partners, on a European level at least, the standards are such that it's allowed to be implemented. It can be procured, so the partners that actually invest their R&D time on new inventions, they also get a return for that. And we have a system which we know how to maintain on the long term. So it's not an arbitrary field we're approaching, but yet, because of that, a very, very exciting field. So what we did with Infra Sweden is, with a constant dialogue with many, many partners, discuss what is lacking? What mechanisms do we not have today? What are the main challenges? And with that, we formulated 6 major challenges, of which a lack of system perspective was one, a rejuvenation of the field was another one. We need to have an influx of people that are thinking differently. We need to make sure that we are allowed to take risks in this industry. If people and companies are not allowed to take risks because the fines are too high afterwards, it will be very hard to stimulate that. So on that, we have come up with a number of things. And so what we're saying, a major aim, though I said that the main goals of the program are to increase 100% sustainability of the infrastructure and transportation infrastructure network and make Sweden leading, we're saying the program is a lot about how to get there. So we're talking about implementable, exportable innovations, because something that may work in Stockholm may also be very interesting in Beijing, where the transportation issues are huge. So if we have a niche product which perhaps works very well, what do we need to adjust it? So in China or in India or some of these pictures which Mikael showed, it's also relevant. And these markets are so big that if we can do this on a very smart way from Sweden, you will be able to say, now we have not only a product to sell you, we also have the surface to go along with it, and we can guarantee that it's embedded in society in a way that it will work on long term, because we've thought the whole system through. But then we also talk about new market ordering. So how can we actually we have the existing networks, we will be doing this work with many of the same people, but how can these new people start thinking in a different way? And it's much more than companies individually pumping up their staff to be more innovative and to be more this and to be more that. A very small example is, if you say a company has to be sustainable and think on a period of 20, 30 years, how can a single employer do that if he or she is only looked upon for his or her return after a year? Because you get your Christmas bonus, yes or not, on the year basis. So the whole system has to be very consistent in a way that it is people at the end of the day. And the people have to be motivated to do this. So new market ordering is very important to be able to reach that goal. Then, what support mechanisms do all our stakeholders need to not only be able to develop these kind of things, but also to make a very smart prioritization? Because to go from a conservative, risk-aversive, yet an industry which takes huge risks and spends huge amounts of money and has an enormous responsibility in society, because if the highways and the roads don't function, everything stops. How do we take that to a field where people dare to be creative, where people dare to explore new ways and new technologies without them first being tested out for 30 or 40 years? So that's a major step. So that means you need knowledge, and you need a very tight collaboration between the experts on different fields that can communicate together, and the companies that are able to take the risks, and governments that enable and allow and support the system. So what we've done in the program is we have made toolboxes with instruments. And the major toolboxes are Innovation Toolbox, which have different themes or instruments. Each of these instruments have their own leadership, people that are driving this and are advising on it. And they're working on different TRL levels. Now, TRL means different things to different people, but generally it stands for Technology Readiness Level, and it means how close you are to implementation in practice. At TRL level 1, and I think this came from NASA once upon a time, TRL 1 means it's very, very far away from implementation, and TRL 9 generally means it's only one step and there it is for society, so it's very close. Universities very often work at 2 to 5. Institutes sometimes work somewhere between 5 and 7, and then in companies work 7 to 9. But I mean, even different markets have different orderings, but just to have a feel for it. The themes that we have is this one, the Create box, we used to have it called Sandbox until somebody explained to me that in Sweden Sandbox means something different, the conflict space to hand out conflicts. But so it's Create box. Create box is really about how can we systematically come with new innovation ideas? For this year's Open Day and last year and all the transportation events from the past 5 years, if you think of which innovation ideas we've been talking about in this field, it is recycling, now we're talking autonomous driving, we're talking electrification, we have energy harvesting, we have a pool of ideas which now we are repeating. But there's not a standard way, or we have no mechanism in place on how to generate new ideas. So the Create box is very much about, can we blend ourselves with people that think completely different, like artists, painters and sculptors, who are used to creating things from nothing, that are used to high stress perhaps, but don't know anything about our industry. What kind of ideas do we get if we use methods which they perhaps use, and do question and answering with people that think very differently? So the Create box is developing methods, and this is not completely new. Artistic intervention is often named, and it has been applied to different industries, but not to ours. Right now we're starting a pilot on this, which has been granted funding this month. And it will be, and we will doing that throughout spring, to see, does this work? How does it work in our field? So we have, there is Skanska and there's Trafikverket and there's VTI that are participating as test organizations to represent industry, government and research to see how does it work. And another field, for instance, is the innovation by design and business and standardization cases. Innovation by design and business standardization is talking very much about research, but while we are doing research, as we are commonly doing in academia, can we already start developing business cases? And what kind of standardization needs does it have? One of the first things we tell our PhD students when they start a research project is forget about standards, because this is not about standards. We're talking about innovation, we're thinking about research for itself. You don't have to think about standardization, but for industry this is very crucial. So can we do this in parallel? Can we already, while we are developing this, thinking about what is the business case behind it, what else needs to be developed, what are the kind of standardization which you're talking about? So examples are, we have Handelshögskolan that have MBA and that have business students that are working on business, part of this, and we will be implementing ideas and challenges which are coming from our industry to their students as cases. Come up with a new business case. This is our field, this is our domain. What kind of new type of business cases can you imagine would work? At the same time, we're working on standardization. What are the standards that we have today which would block innovations coming from this environment, that would be needed? What kind of standardization is needed for production to be able to run? And as we're doing that and coupling this to research projects, we're hoping that by the time a project within this theme is finished, something comes out which can go to different places within Infra Sweden and outside, of course, such as technical demonstrations, socio-technical demonstrations, when people are using it. What will happen for the people itself? Very much innovation is, people feel threatened by innovation because they think my particular expertise is no longer needed. So it's very important that people understand where their role is going to be when innovation appears on the field, and what they would need to get along with this kind of innovation. So how does their present knowledge, which is often not documented knowledge, but it's gut feeling, it is 30 years of practice, how can this be applied in new inventions in a way that the new inventions work as well? Because we don't want to lose the knowledge that we have today either. We cannot supplement a whole new of people to our field and say we forget about the other ones. That will not work either. So another one that we have here is servitization. Servitization is talking about surfaces. I mentioned before when we give new innovations to the field, what surfaces come along with that. I don't know how many of you have a car that once something is broken, it says now you have to go to the garage. Apparently there are also cars that already book the meeting at the garage. So what will happen if our roads do the same thing? There is a pothole being formed and it's already booking the next appointment for somebody to come and fix it. Let alone it would be nice if we don't have potholes in the future. Servitization is talking about surfaces which will come along with the innovations. What if these surfaces were not provided by externals, but they were provided from within our industry, because this industry itself understands its field best. So services and servitization is becoming more and more important with these complex innovations. So that's what this theme will be talking about. And then the product card, and which is working very close to the field. So there are many products or inventions which are on its way today. But after a research project, for instance, ends, or after a pilot ends, they are put back in the cupboard and they don't go anywhere. What do we have which is almost finished? Or can we blend a couple of projects which are here and there and they don't know about each other to combine and perhaps with a little bit extra on top? It's a fantastic invention which we can start testing and which we can start implementing in the world. So together, this is toolboxes. This is a toolbox with instruments, and each of these instruments are thematic areas within the program, which have different methods and different activities. So from within these themes, activities will be driven. Alongside the innovation toolbox, we're having an education toolbox. Education toolbox is mainly having 3 different instruments. We have the Young Infra Academy, and the Young Infra Academy, despite the little old Einstein there, is talking about how can we recruit young people, new people to this field. How can we show that the transportation infrastructure sector is a very creative and exciting sector to be working in, that there is a very long and a very exciting future for people. So right now, one of the projects which has also started in the program is to make a basis for the Young Infra Academy. How can we build it up? There are very many networks today of high schools and innovation programs, talent programs at the companies and within universities and at the high schools in Sweden. So the Young Infra Academy, together with Vetenskap och Allmänhet, is going to make a program for it. How can we optimize an academy which can have ambassadors throughout the country of young people who think this is a very exciting domain and would like to bring this forward and go into university or go into the next steps in their career to come and provide solutions. Infra AIM is talking about academy industry meetings, to have it in a systematic way, just like today we're meeting and we're discussing and getting to know each other. And the co-op scholarships was what we were talking about earlier. This originated from our previous co-op, activities which we had in Road to Science. And we learned a lot from that. And the co-op scholarships within Infra Sweden may have a different structure, but it's a way of how can these different stakeholders understand each other. The third toolbox that we have is the Dissemination Toolbox. And it consists of 2 things. One is the IM Infra, which is talking about networks. What networks do we have today in the world and in Sweden, which are very important for this domain? How can we combine these networks in a good way? And how can we give certain people that perhaps don't have access to certain networks today, access to them? For instance, how can SME companies use our international network to enable their niche project to be tested out in India or in Costa Rica or somewhere else where normally they wouldn't go as an SME company? The virtual world is something which we are right now closing the procurement of, which will be building a virtual world much bigger than the one that we have in Road to Science, and also with different functionalities, but it's giving the same idea behind it. How can people contribute and be part of Infra Sweden? How can people be part of this without being here? Well, the virtual world, and this will be very much based on gaming platforms as we know them. So it will be exciting to see where that will end up in spring. So the challenges I described, what we try to address them is methods and tools, where systematically we are getting our partners involved in these different methods and tools to see if we can reach a change of structure while developing new inventions. So the question is if that will be you or not. And some of you I know are already very much involved in this, but the idea is that more and more people get involved. This is an open program, though there have been certain people who were behind it. The idea is that this is a 12-year program within Sweden. That means people that are involved will grow and change. And the idea is that if you want to be involved, you have opportunities. So all our activities will be open. Most of them will definitely be open. And there will be open calls for proposals. People can go in. There will be training. There will be different things where people can subscribe to be part of. And that I can say that one date that you should definitely put in your agenda already is the 6th of April. That will be the open house for Infra Sweden. During this open house, we have currently 6 projects which have started in December. which will then already start presenting their results and what does it mean within the program. And we will discuss more about the program. And if you want to have, we can discuss now, but generally if you want to reach us, you can send an email to Programkontoret at Infra Sweden or visit our website.